This conversation took place between the emergency operator and the caller. 911, what's your emergency? Hello, can you hear me? You gotta help me. Intimate with my girlfriend in the bathroom. She can't breathe air. I mean, like, oh my God, she's gonna die, man. Come on, I can barely understand. Calm down. Oh my God, she was drinking and I don't know what happened. I know she went to the bathroom. And when I went in there she was, there it was. Blood on the floor, all like, I don't know. She wasn't breathing. I mean, it's like she's going to die, come on. What's the address? I don't know. I'm just smoking my cigarette, man. I'm just smoking my cigarette. And then the damn thing happened. Maria, come on, baby, please. I need you to give us an address so we can help you. Sir, I need an address so we can help you. Sunday morning, Dawn was just breaking through the windows of his new apartment when Fidel Lopez lit a cigarette. Outside the broken door, his 31-year-old girlfriend Maria lay in a pool of blood, her life hanging in the balance. Fidel finished his cigarette and then gathered his courage and called 911. The operator quickly found out the address and dispatched a patrol. The call was logged at exactly 3:39 a.m. on September 20, 2015. When police officers arrived on scene, they were confronted with a gruesome sight. According to Detective Christopher Piper, when they entered Lopez's apartment in the Colonnade complex, they saw Fidel standing next to Maria's body. He was desperately crying for help. Doctors immediately rushed to the woman, who was covered in blood. They also found traces of blood in the dressing room. The apartment was in a terrible state. The walls and doors were mutilated as if a brutal struggle had taken place inside. Despite the doctor's best efforts, Maria showed no signs of life. At 4:02 a.m., she was officially pronounced dead. The obvious signs of violence and struggle led police to treat the apartment as a crime scene. The apartment was immediately secured and Fidel was detained until investigators arrived. Detective Piper said he spoke briefly with one of the police officers at the scene, examined the nearly empty apartment and learned more about the circumstances of what happened. The Sunrise Road police officer informed the detective who Maria and Fidel were and what was known about them at the time the police were called. Maria and Fidel had moved into the apartment less than a week ago. Maria was originally from Peru and worked as an apartment complex manager. Fidel worked as a mechanic at a truck stop. The young people started dating about a year and 2 months ago after meeting at a club. Maria had recently separated from her husband after an 8-year marriage. Fidel lived with his mother. The couple, after deciding to live together, moved into an apartment in Hollywood Beach, Florida. On the apartment, it was clear that the young people moved in recently and start their life together almost from scratch. There was not a complete set of furniture. Boxes were used as a table, as on the night of the incident. The apartment was bare, not yet lived in, and so the dents and holes in the walls, the broken glass doors, the blood that was almost everywhere, and of course Maria's breathless body were immediately apparent. Detective Piper's report states that Maria's naked body was lying on the bathroom floor. In addition to the blood on the floor, there were bloody marks on the walls in the hallway, as well as on the closet and bathroom doors and many other surfaces. Inside the closet were pieces of something that looked like bloody human fetus. The initial assumption was that the girl had tried to dispose of the fetus on her own, but as forensic investigators later determined, it was intestines that Fidel had ripped out of his girlfriend during rough sex. Detective Piper was introduced to Fidel Lopez and asked to give an account of what happened. The report states that Fidel agreed and then, accompanied by police officers, was taken to the San Rice police station at 7:40 a.m. There he was informed of his Miranda rights and placed in an interrogation room. And then Fidel signed a waiver of those rights, saying he couldn't read English, but if it was read aloud to him, he would understand. Defense attorneys would later argue unsuccessfully that because Fidel was not a native English speaker, he could not fully understand the Miranda rules. The Miranda rules are a legal requirement in the United States that during an arrest, the detainee must be advised of his rights, and the arresting officer must receive an affirmative answer to the question of whether he understands what is being said. Fidel Lopez, a native of Cuba, moved to the United States at the age of 16. Lopez attended high school but dropped out in 10th grade. Fidel told the investigator about his relationship with Maria, how it began and how it developed. He then approached Saturday in the story. On that day, he left work a couple hours early and met up with Maria, who was also able to get off early. At home, Maria cooked them a dinner of chicken, beans, and rice. And after dinner, the couple went to visit Fidel's mother in Miami. Then they returned and went to a restaurant near their apartment. They each had a glass of margarita cocktail, and they split the third portion in half. The couple then went to a liquor store and bought a bottle of tequila for Sunday morning. Dawn was just breaking through the windows of their new apartment when Fidel Lopez lit a cigarette. Outside the broken door, his 31-year-old girlfriend Maria lay in a pool of blood, her life hanging in the balance. Fidel finished his cigarette and then got up the courage to call 911. The operator quickly found out the address and dispatched a patrol. The call was logged at exactly 3:39 a.m. on September 20, 2015. When police officers arrived on scene, they were confronted with a gruesome sight. According to Detective Christopher Piper, when they entered Lopez's apartment in the Colonnade complex, they saw Fidel standing next to Maria's body. He was desperately crying for help. Doctors immediately rushed to the woman, who was covered in blood. They also found traces of blood in the dressing room. The apartment was in a terrible state. The walls and doors were mutilated as if a brutal struggle had taken place inside. Despite the doctor's best efforts, Maria showed no signs of life. At 4:02 a.m., she was officially pronounced dead. The obvious signs of violence and struggle led police to treat the apartment as a crime scene. The apartment was immediately secured and Fidel was detained until investigators arrived. Detective Piper said he spoke briefly with one of the police officers at the scene, examined the nearly empty apartment, and learned more about the circumstances of what happened. The Sunrise Road police officer informed the detective who Maria and Fidel were and what was known about them at the time the police were called. Maria and Fidel had moved into the apartment less than a week ago. Maria was originally from Peru and worked as an apartment complex manager. $80, and by about 10 p.m. they were home. According to Fidel, Maria was already tipsy from margarita. At home, they continued to drink, for which they put 2 cardboard boxes on the floor. And since they do not have a table, they place glasses and an appetizer on the boxes. Next, they listen to music, drink. Tequila hits them in the head and Maria, according to Fidel, asked him to fulfill some of her fantasies in an intimate way. And much of what Fidel told her was violent and dangerous. But because he was her man, he tried to fulfill everything she asked. Except his memories were fuzzy. He'd been drunk that night, they'd been drinking some more. And in the end, the only thing Fidel could remember more clearly was calling 911. Fidel also said when they were doing various things, Maria said she felt nauseous and asked him to come out of the bathroom. Lopez got out and was outside smoking a cigarette. But he doesn't remember if the bathroom door was forced or if he was the one who broke it open. But it was probably Fidel who did it, since Maria isn't strong enough. He just remembers seeing broken glass on the floor, but doesn't remember how it broke or why. And he also remembers that he went to the bathroom and Maria was breathing intermittently somehow at the same time. And Fidel thought maybe she was vomiting, but he didn't hear any distinctive sounds. When the detectives asked about the fight that night, Fidel said there was no fight. They had been drinking and listening to music. Detectives continued to probe the boyfriend and ask him leading questions. Lopez was asked if he was offended when his girlfriend made disparaging remarks about his manhood. And the guy replied that he wasn't upset, he just felt a little silly. The next question the investigators were interested in: was there any damage to the apartment before they moved in? And Fidel answered that no, the apartment was fine. But as the detectives focused on it, Fidel said that he must have done it, but he doesn't remember when and why, and added that he could have done it in those moments when he was angry. Further questioning revealed that Fidel may have been angry because of Maria's ex-husband, whom she mentioned in the conversation, but he could not remember exactly what was said. The detectives continued their questioning, conducting it as a normal conversation. There were no accusations in their tone, and getting to the point where Fidel realized Maria was dead, they saw him get emotional. Then they continue their confidential conversation and Fidel begins to tell them that he tried to give Maria CPR, even though he didn't know what actions were needed. Maria was lying with her eyes open but not moving, and he was lying next to her on the floor, trying to bring the girl back to life and screaming, calling for help, hoping someone would come and help. I tried to give her CPR. I don't even know how to give CPR, but she wasn't breathing at all. She had her eyes open, but she wasn't moving. I carried her in my arms and waited for the police. The police were interested in whether Fidel had beaten the woman before, whether he had used force, but he denied physical violence against Maria. During the interrogation, the guy repeatedly claimed that all the damage in the apartment was done by his hands that night, and then he was asked an important question. So you admit that everything that was destroyed and smashed, everything that happened in that apartment was done by you? He confirmed this, saying that he did not hurt Maria, and kept asking if she was comfortable, and even when he noticed that the woman was bleeding, she said she was not in pain. Officers told Fidel that Maria was examined by a medical examiner who stated that her injuries were very serious, with bleeding, internal organ damage, and multiple lacerations, and when the police suggested that there had been a brutal rape, Fidel began to deny everything, and said that he was doing whatever Maria told him to do. It was explained to him that Maria had injuries inside, the pain of which was impossible to bear. But Fidel insisted to his story that he had done nothing against Maria's wishes. However, the detectives tried to prove to him that someone who loved another person could not have done such a thing to them. Maria was seriously injured. She had severe injuries, and the police began to reproach Fidel for not showing the woman proper care and then washing off all traces of blood. This doesn't look like a case of rough intimacy. There's blood everywhere, everywhere. I was just doing what she told me to do. She didn't ask you to do it because the pain she was in would have been unbearable. She has traumas inside her that need to be explained. The guy was at a loss, and then he was told that he needed to confess what had happened. Especially since the police knew a lot more than what he had told them, and that Maria, if he loved her, deserved a fair ending to the story. Again, the police ask if Fidel could have hurt his beloved, and to his answer no, they say, but you did. The injuries that were inflicted on her were not self-inflicted by her, and there was no one else in the apartment. Fidel again agrees with these conclusions. Do you love this girl? Of course I do. Well, would you do anything to hurt her? Of course not. Well, but you did, didn't you? The injuries that were inflicted on her, she couldn't have inflicted them on herself. Of course not. And there was no one else in the apartment, it was you. I know. There was silence for a while, and then Fidel began to talk as if he burst into tears. He began to speak, hurriedly and interrupting himself. As it turned out, Maria said she wanted to go to Peru to visit her mother, and she would be away temporarily. Fidel would not be able to use her car to get to and from work. That's what caused the fight, and the guy doesn't remember how they ended up in the closet, but they made up. Then the couple engaged in intimacy and Maria called Fidel by her ex-husband's name. The same thing happened the second time. Fidel goes on to describe a series of attacks on Maria using both his own body and various objects found around the house, which he shoved into her crotch. After he realizes that Maria is no longer alive, he starts running through all the rooms, smashing and smashing everything he can get his hands on, then stops to exhale and take a smoke break. He then took off the clothes he was wearing, washed himself, put on fresh clothes not stained with blood, and called 911. Fidel confessed to detectives that he had committed the crime because Maria had screamed the name of another during intimacy, in moments of acute pleasure, and he regretted what he had done to her. And because of that, he can't even look at her now. I didn't mean to kill her. I know I killed her. That's what caused what I did to her. That's not human, man. I just took her life. I didn't mean to do it, but I did it. I won't even be able to see her, man. While the interrogation continued, experts collected evidence at the scene and examined Maria's mutilated body. Police officers interviewed neighbors, and many said they heard screams and sounds of conflict coming from the apartment. However, no one called the emergency services that night except Fidel himself. When it became clear that Maria was dying, Fidel Lopez was arrested and charged with the murder of his girlfriend Maria Namath. A long, horrible night dragged on until noon before Fidel was shackled and transferred to the Broad County Jail. A man with no criminal record other than a 2014 arrest for disorderly conduct while intoxicated was put in a jail cell, recognized as a murderous monster who belongs in a cage and kept there. Could it have been the alcohol that drove him out of his mind? Did jealousy turn the man into something he could never have imagined himself to be? In the initial stages of the trial, Fidel Lopez's attorneys tried to waive all of his questioning and confession on the basis of his limited English proficiency, which meant that he could not understand his rights under the Miranda rule and could not request the presence of an attorney from the first moments of detention, as well as his right not to answer certain questions at his discretion. However, the judge ruled that there was sufficient evidence in the videotape to show that Fidel demonstrated not only a working use of English, but that he fully understood what he was asked and what he said in response. The court denied the defense motion, and Fidel Lopez, charged with the brutal murder of Maria Namath, was sentenced to death. The state of Florida was still using the death penalty as a punishment at the time. On July 14, 2017, after spending a lot of time in the Broad County Jail, Fidel accepted a plea deal and plea offer. On August 3, 2017, Lopez pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and sexual assault of the victim and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As part of his plea deal with the state, he waived his right to appeal the sentence in exchange for commuting the death penalty to life in prison. The tragic events of that night forever shattered the world of both families, Fidel Lopez and Maria Namath. What happened cannot be changed. Thank you for watching. If you're interested in stories like this, I recommend watching other true crime videos. Click on the subscribe button and don't forget to give us a like.